This was the first time humanity ever plunged directly into Jupiter, not just flying past it, not orbiting it, but diving straight into its depths. You might think the story is about what we discovered. It's not. The most terrifying part is what happened to the probe after it entered, how it died, layer by layer, under pressures and temperatures no machine was ever meant to survive. Chapter 1. A Mission Designed to Die. In 1995, NASA launched one of the boldest experiments in space exploration. They built a spacecraft called Galileo, but unlike most missions, this one had a very different goal. Part of it was never meant to come back. This wasn't a round trip. It wasn't even a risky mission. It was a suicide mission by design. The spacecraft carried two main components, an orbiter, which would stay safely above Jupiter, and a probe, which would plunge straight into the planet. From the moment it separated, the probe was already dead. It just didn't know it yet. Chapter 2. The Point of No Return. 147 days before reaching Jupiter, the probe separated from the orbiter. Explosive bolts fired, and in an instant it was gone, spinning away like a bullet fired into the darkness. Its target, a planet nearly 81 million kilometers away. There was no turning back, no course correction, no rescue. Just a silent, lonely journey toward the largest planet in the solar system. The entry angle had to be perfect. Too steep, it would burn up instantly. Too shallow, it would skip off the atmosphere and be lost forever. Everything depended on a razor-thin margin of error. Chapter 3. Alone in the Void. As the probe drifted deeper into space, the orbiter did something crucial. It turned away, fired its engines, and left. Because the orbiter was never supposed to follow. Its job was simple. Wait at a safe distance, listen, and relay whatever the probe managed to send back. Because once the probe entered Jupiter, it would only have minutes to communicate. Miss that window? Everything would be lost forever. Chapter 4. Awakening after 10 years. 6 hours before impact, something incredible happened. The probe woke up. For nearly a decade, its instruments had been asleep. Now, one by one, they powered on. This was it. The final countdown had begun. Ahead of it was Jupiter's radiation belt, a region so violent, so filled with high-energy particles that almost nothing had ever been studied there directly. The probe entered it anyway. Chapter 5. First Contact with the Unknown. The first instruments to activate were particle detectors. Immediately, they began recording millions of particles every second. At the same time, another mystery was being investigated: lightning on Jupiter. Scientists suspected it years, but there was a problem. On Earth, lightning depends on the ground. Jupiter has no ground. So how could lightning even exist there? The probe carried radio sensors to detect electromagnetic signals, optical detectors to capture flashes of light. If lightning existed, this would be the first time humanity would prove it directly. Chapter 6. Jupiter Fills the Sky. Minutes before entry, Jupiter grew larger and larger until it filled the entire sky. There was no horizon, no land, just an endless, swirling ocean of clouds. Then, the fall began. At 47.4 kilometers per second, faster than anything most humans can imagine. Chapter 7. Impact with a world that has no surface. Jupiter doesn't have a surface. There's nowhere to land, no ground to stand on. Only layers of gas, growing denser, hotter, and more violent. The probe didn't land, it fell, and it would keep falling until it was destroyed. Chapter 8. Fire. The moment it hit the atmosphere, everything changed. Friction ignited the air around it. The temperature soared instantly. Within seconds, the outer shell reached hundreds of degrees Celsius. The probe relied on one thing, a heat shield designed to burn away itself. It sacrificed its own material to carry heat away. It was literally destroying itself to stay alive. Chapter 9. The most violent 15 seconds. Then came the worst part. In just 15 seconds, the probe experienced 228 times Earth's gravity. 228 G. For comparison, humans lose consciousness around 5 to 10 G. This was over 20 times that. The probe dropped 230 kilometers almost instantly, and the temperature? Higher than twice the surface of the sun. At that moment, it stopped being a spacecraft. It became a man-made meteor. Chapter 10. Survival. Barely. After nearly 2 minutes, the worst was over. But at a cost. The heat shield had lost almost half its mass. 90 kilograms gone. Burned away. Now came the next challenge, deploying the parachute. But something went wrong. Chapter 11. A near-fatal failure. At the exact moment the parachute should have opened, nothing happened. A wiring error, a timing failure. The probe kept falling, faster, deeper, pressure rising, temperature shifting. Everything it had survived so far was about to be wasted. Then, suddenly, it worked. The parachute deployed, barely in time. Chapter 12. Floating in a world without ground. The rear heat shield separated, the parachute expanded, and for the first time, the probe slowed. It wasn't falling anymore. It was drifting, floating through Jupiter's sky. But there was no ground below, only deeper layers, endless descent. Chapter 13. The mission begins. Now, finally, the real mission started. A mechanical arm extended outward, sampling the clouds, analyzing chemical composition, atmospheric structure, temperature, pressure. For the first time in history, humanity was directly touching Jupiter's atmosphere. Chapter 14. A signal across 778 million kilometers. The probe began transmitting data upward to the orbiter, then relayed back to Earth 778 million kilometers away. If the signal failed, everything would be lost. For a moment, there was nothing. Then, connection. The data was flowing. Humanity was listening. Chapter 15. The Secrets of the Universe. One of the most important experiments began, measuring hydrogen and helium ratios. Why? Because these elements were formed in the earliest moments after the Big Bang. Jupiter might be preserving ancient cosmic history, like a time capsule. By studying it, we weren't just learning about a planet, we were learning about the origin of the universe itself. Chapter 16. Deeper, hotter, deadlier. As the probe descended, temperature began rising again. Pressure increased rapidly. Strange atmospheric currents formed, violent flows driven by heat differences. The deeper it went, the more alien everything became. Chapter 17. It should have been dead already. The mission was designed to last about 35 minutes. That was the expected survival time. But the probe kept going. 40 minutes, 45 minutes, still transmitting, still alive. It was surviving longer than anyone expected. Then, failure began. One transmitter died. The backup struggled. Signals flickered, faded, returned, then weakened again. Inside the probe, temperature rising, pressure crushing, metal beginning to deform. After 1 hour, silence. But the probe wasn't gone yet. Not really. It kept falling, deeper into Jupiter, where things became truly unimaginable. Chapter 20. Total destruction. First, the parachute melted. Then the probe entered free fall again. Aluminum parts began to liquefy, then vaporize. Hours passed. Even titanium, one of the strongest metals humanity could build, began to melt, then evaporate. At 5,000 times Earth's atmospheric pressure, 1,700 degrees Celsius, nothing could survive. Not metal, not machinery, not even the strongest alloys humanity could build. Chapter 21. No wreckage, no trace. In the end, there was nothing left. No debris, no crash site, no remains. The probe didn't break. It didn't explode. It was erased, atom by atom, becoming part of Jupiter itself. Final ending. A beautiful death. For just 1 hour, it lived. Long enough to send back answers. Long enough to